I wanted to welcome everybody. This is our second meeting for the 2021 Virtual Vanderbilt Summer Science Academy. If you're here at Vanderbilt in person, it's great to see you virtually. If you're coming from all over the world to come and join us, so glad to have you here. Today, we're going to have an introduction to the MD programs and what the structure is like for that, why people would want to pursue an MD program. And we have joining us Jen Kimble, who directs admissions for the Vanderbilt MD program. She has been at Vanderbilt for longer than I have and just has such a tremendous background in this. She's going to give you an incredible introduction. It's a pleasure to work with her, and it's even more of a pleasure for you guys to get to meet her. So thank you so much, Jen, for being here. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking me to do this, Dr. Bowman. Welcome to our talk today, everybody. I just let you know a little bit about my background. I have been working with pre-med students or med school students now since 1999. So when you look at me, you can do the math and realize I started when I was about 4.5 years old. So I've been working with y'all for a long time. I tried to do a presentation that kind of gave like a rough background, kind of just so you know where we're coming up, because I think I'm talking to y'all in a few more weeks about the actual admissions process and what you have to do to be competitive and all that good stuff. But there's a diverse crop of y'all on this call, and some of y'all might know what life is like in med school like the back of your hand. Some of you are just like, hey, I'm not really sure exactly what's going on. This is all going to be new to me. But I want to make a promise to you that my goal is to make sure that all of your questions are answered by the time our talk is finished. And I think Dr. Bowman said I had 4 hours for this presentation. So just kidding, it won't be that long. I'll get through it rather painlessly for you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you. Maybe not. I had a presentation earlier today and my computer decided it did not want to share a screen. And so I thought I'd figured out what was going on with that. So let me try this again. Share the screen. Awesome. Okay, can you see that now? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, very good. So we'll start from the beginning. So let's just talk about the general structure of becoming a medical doctor. And before we kind of figure out what is the structure of medical school like, let's talk about why should you become a physician. And so these are just kind of sample themes that I read a lot in personal statements, which is part of the admissions process when you're applying to medical school. You love science and you love to help people. You want to know all the answers. You want to make a difference in society and you want to fix things and know what to do in emergency situations, and you want a stable and comfortable career and stuff like that. These are what I call kind of like your 5th grade career day answers about why you want to go into a career path. So what we really need to do is drill down a little bit more, okay? And so one of the things that you'll hear from any medical school out there is that we really do want you to get some actual experiences and exposures in the field. And what that does is it helps kind of drive your mission statement as to why you want to be a physician and gives you a little bit more concrete answers. Because if you love science, you love to help people, you should be a high school biology teacher. You want to know all the answers, you should go work for Google. If you want to make a difference in society, you should be a social worker. If you want to fix things, you should be a car mechanic. You want a comfortable and stable career, maybe you should go and do an MBA and be a CEO of Google or Amazon or whatever, you know. So we need you to kind of come down and drill down with really solid answers as to why you want to be a physician. And so one of the things that sometimes helps drive your decision towards a career in medicine is kind of thinking of what are some traits that physicians have that maybe you also have to kind of help you decide if this is the right career path for you. So we really do need to see lifelong learners in medicine. If you approach this career as, hey, after I finish medical school and residency, I'll know everything there's to know about diseases or, illnesses or cancer or whatever, you want to go into. In actuality, the field of medicine is always changing. You're always going to learn more stuff about healthcare. So we really need you to make sure that you are a lifelong learner. The marathon-minded point, and I'm not going to read each one of these because hopefully y'all can read the screen pretty well, but marathon-minded folks are people who know that they're in for something for the long haul. Sprint-minded folks are like, hey, I'm just going to be in this for the short term, in and out kind of thing. Marathon-minded folks, I think it's important to recognize that after you spend a lot of time in your educational journey to become a physician, going through medical school, going through residency and your examinations to become board certified, you're kind of in it for the long haul. Whereas like sometimes other professions allow you to kind of switch career paths a little bit easier and stuff. So you're making a commitment when you're kind of young to say, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that's why we really want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, which is once again why it's so important to get some medical exposures early on before you apply to medical school. These are some other common traits that we see in physicians. On interview day, we really try to suss some of these out. In your application materials, the secondary essay for Vanderbilt, we ask you a time that you've asked for help from somebody. And I apologize, my daughter is texting me despite me telling her that I'm on Zoom. Oh wait, she just recognized that I'm on Zoom. It's fun to have a 13-year-old daughter, trust me. So we really want to make sure that our students, like I said, have these different traits that we think make people to be successful in medicine. And that's why we ask you these questions on interview day about a time that you've had to make an ethical decision, things of that nature. So let's talk about the 10,000 foot view. And I'm just going to do a little bit, like I said, of education here, some of the stuff you probably may already know, or at least have an idea from watching medical dramas on TV, i.e. Grey's Anatomy. So an MD degree is going to lend itself to allopathic medicine. A DO degree is for osteopathic medicine. Both of these are physicians after their residency. They both have diagnostic and prescriptive rights. Honestly, you probably can't tell much of a difference between an MD and a DO in their daily life. It's just a little bit of a difference with what they're training with what their training is and how their approach to the patient is. I'm happy after we do the talk, I'm going to have a slide that says conversation time, and I want us to have a conversation if you want to discuss a little bit more about the difference between an MD and a DO. But for the purposes of this talk, the stuff that I'm telling you can apply to both career paths. You'll also hear me talk a little bit about a UME, undergraduate medical education, and GME, which is residency. One of the things that sometimes trips up people is when we talk about undergraduate medical education, sometimes they think of like their pre-med stuff because you're an undergrad when you're taking these pre-med classes. But in actuality, that's actually what we call your 4 years of medical school training. GME is your residency program. So I've also given you a list of definitions that people often throw around. Once again, going back to Grey's Anatomy, you might hear somebody talk about being like the chief resident. You go, what's the difference between a senior resident and a chief resident? Chief, you usually have to apply for this position, and they're kind of the resident in charge, if you will. A fellow, sometimes people say, oh, I'm doing my fellowship in pathology. They've actually finished their residency program and are now getting advanced education, advanced certification, a year or too long, depending on the fellowship program, to get more intensive training in a certain area. An attending is somebody who's already finished their residency. So once again, just to kind of give you a broad overview of some of the definitions that you might hear a little bit about. In my former life, before I went back to graduate school, I taught 7th grade. So I think it's in social studies was my area of expertise. So I think it's interesting to know a little bit more about where we're from. This is once again 10,000 foot overview of medical education history. But back when our country was first founded, honestly, there was really no policy on how to educate physicians. You had folks that, hey, let's get together and teach people in our community how to be physicians. Okay, that sounds cool. My cousin is a doctor from St. Louis. He's going to move to Nashville. We're going to teach people. Okay, great. Sounds good. There was no real strong accrediting agency. There was no accrediting agency at the time. There was nothing that really solidified this is what you have to do to become a physician. It was just something that, hey, I saw what you have to do in order to, diagnose somebody. So I think I'm a physician now. So it's a little bit Wild West out there. And the College of Philadelphia came along, which then later became University of Pennsylvania, and they started kind of the first medical school, like with the university. And then more and more started coming up and founded Vanderbilt along the time, came around in 1873. The Association of American Medical Colleges were founded. In 1910 was when the Flexner Report came out. And basically what this did in the huge nutshell is this gentleman, Dr. Flexner, went to every single medical school. And once again, they weren't necessarily affiliated with universities at the time, and wrote an all-encompassing book of what medical schools were actually doing, what they needed to do to prepare the next generation of physicians and stuff. So after this time, that's when a lot of kind of mom and pop operations of, hey, we're going to teach people how to be doctor in our community. A lot of those ended up shutting down. It became more of the norm that medical schools were affiliated with the university. And then up until World War I, the idea of doing a residency after medical school wasn't necessarily the norm. And after World War I, that's when it became more common. And then the residency program really took flight. And we are coming up to about 90 years of requiring folks to do a medical residency in order to have prescriptive and diagnostic rights. Once again, after your 4 years of medical school, your undergraduate medical school training, you will graduate, you will be an MD, but to actually be able to be licensed to treat patients, you will need to finish up a residency program. So what does medical school look like? This is a really hard question to answer because there's altogether almost 200 different kinds of medical schools out there between the MD and the DO programs. But I will say historically, it was what we call a 2x2 curriculum. 2 years of preclinical science courses where you walked the hallways of that medical school with flashcards in hand, memorizing diseases and the treatment plans. You were just like a walking encyclopedia of all things medical knowledge, but you didn't have any clinical exposure. And then your last 2 years, you were actually in the clinics doing your clinical rotations and applying the things that you just memorized off of index cards. And so medical education at that point was just a little bit disjointed because you weren't really necessarily learning by doing. These schools were graded, A, B, C, D, F kind of grading scale that you're probably all pretty familiar with. And it was a little bit more structured so that the medical school at Vanderbilt was very similar to the medical school at Medical College of Georgia, for example, and stuff. But in the last 15, 20 years, maybe we've become a little bit more progressive, and we've come up with different ways to train physicians that makes sense based upon the resources that medical school has to offer. So you're going to find that more and more medical schools have a more innovative curriculum, branded something really pretty. Ours is called Curriculum 2.0 because much like your phone upgrades, like version 2.2, 2.4, 2.8. It's constantly progressing and evolving. So is our curriculum. And so more and more medical schools are offering clinical exposures early on in your training. More schools are offering electives if you're interested in medical Spanish or sociodeterminants of health. These kind of courses that, 30 years ago weren't necessarily teachable, if you will, in a medical school curriculum. We've also moved to something called a competency-based curriculum. The residency programs had already kind of moved to this model years ago. And what a competency-based curriculum is that we tell you what outcomes you have to achieve in that grading block, and you'll either meet them, which is fine, pass and move on, blow them out of the water, or maybe you didn't meet all of those competencies and we need to work a little bit on X, Y, and Z to get you to where you need to be to move forward and stuff in your curriculum and your learning. A lot of medical schools have also moved to pass fail. And sometimes pre-med students will say, well, like pass fail for medical school, like how would a residency know if you know your stuff or you don't? That's the answer to that is that I'll show you in a couple of slides down the road. Part of your application process to residency is we present you to the residency placement directors for that. You'll also notice if you start like Googling different medical schools, that some medical schools have also moved to a model where instead of 4 years of medical school, it's now 3 years of medical school, because they're trying to get more physicians out there to do primary care medicine. And so they're able to shave a year off the medical school curriculum, because they're also able to teach you in that year of residency at that medical school. So candidates would save a little bit of money because they're not paying a year of tuition. Plus they're making money because you get paid in residency a little bit more. So some medical schools have moved to that model to help make primary care a little more appealing to students. There are some medical schools that offer BSMDs. And so you graduate in 8 years or so, getting your medical degree, but it's a guaranteed spot for you to kind of get your MD degree and your BS degree at the same time. And then a lot of schools like Vanderbilt offer joint degrees. Maybe right now that you want to study public health, and maybe you're going to look for medical schools that have a cohort group where you come in for doing MD and public health at the same time. Schools like Vanderbilt, our philosophy is sometimes you don't know what you're interested in until you get here. And so we offer you the opportunity to do a joint degree once you're enrolled with us, but you don't have to decide before you join us that you're entering a cohort. MD PhD program kind of moves like that. You come in as an MD PhD cohort. And I think Dr. Williams is going to talk to you all, or she already has. She's talking to you a little bit more about the MD PhD. Our program is wonderful. So just put that out there. So what I'm going to do is kind of just give you a snapshot of and walk you through what a medical school curriculum looks like. And hey, we're going to go through Vanderbilt's. So something that often surprises pre-med students is that more and more medical schools actually start during the summer, and that's becoming more and more common. And the reason why is because your first year of medical school is like taking a sip of water through a fire hose. And our philosophy is let's kind of get you acclimated so we can get you a little bit more slow and steady to where you need to be at the end of your first year by starting a couple months earlier. So I know some of my colleagues at some medical schools, they start May 31st with classes. For Vanderbilt, we start the middle of July with classes. Something else that you might find totally awesome is if you get tired of paying, $500 for textbooks each semester and then trying to sell them at your used bookstore and getting like, a quarter for it. Most medical school textbooks, air quote textbooks, are online. And the reason why is medicine is constantly evolving. So instead of some great, authoritative, I know all the answers about, microbiology and medicine, writing this textbook, which takes a long time to write an actual physical textbook, they can put this stuff online and save you a little bit of money with that. So most textbooks are going to be online for you because that information is constantly evolving. Although a lot of times our students will keep a little handy drug reference guide or something in their white coat pocket. So I'm giving you a bunch of colorful information here to show you an example of one of curriculum styles that Vanderbilt has and a lot of other medical schools have, and that's called a systems-based approach to medicine. And so your competencies that you're learning your first year are all kind of hovering around a certain system of the body, as opposed to some medical schools, you learn about the biochemistry and how it affects this. For us, it's let's learn about the endocrine system, and let's learn about the biochemistry and the microbiology and the virology and the anatomy of that system, instead of learning everything there is to know about biochemistry through the entire body, microbiology, virology. That makes sense. So a lot of curriculums are also layered, as we are here with this. And so you're learning about the sciences of the human body, but we're also supplementing that with clinical experiences. We think it's important that you see medicine in action to make it click in your brain when you're learning it. So for example, when we learn about the renal system, we'll do a case-based approach where the night before in our online learning classroom, you'll read about this case that you're going to be discussing the next day in your case-based small group. So all of your fellow first-year students will go into their case-based learning classroom. For us, you'll have about 8 students with a faculty mentor. You'll discuss your case. Your faculty mentor might highlight some things or kind of see how you interact as a peer group in discovering what's going on with your patient that you're presented in the case. And so you guys might divide up into small groups. So look up different things in that classroom of 8, read up this article, look at this, go to this PubMed article to read about renal issues or something like that. And then you kind of come up and discover what's going on with your patient. And so like, let's say, for example, your patient has polycystic kidney disease. So then, and the kind of olive colored on the slide below the schematic, you'll see large, medium group lab. That's going to be an anatomy lab. And so in your anatomy lab, you're dissecting the renal system and you're looking at the kidneys. And the kidneys in your patient that you are doing your anatomy lab with, that donor might have unremarkable kidneys, completely normal. But 2 cadaver stations over, that patient has polycystic kidney disease, and you're able to kind of see the organs. Or let's say in your entire anatomy lab, nobody's donor had polycystic kidney disease. Well, we're going to show you what the disease organs look like in a pathology lab experience. So you'll have the opportunity to really see like what the disease organs look like. So then in the afternoons, and like I said, I'm showing you Vanderbilt. In the afternoons, you're going to go to the physical diagnosis class, which is kind of in that blue there. And that's going to be where you're going to go to a clinic that supports what you're learning in the curriculum. So if we're learning about polycystic kidney disease, we might be in the nephrology clinic. We might be in the dialysis clinic, but you're learning about what's going on in your patient through your clinical experiences and physical diagnosis. A lot of medical schools also offer you the opportunity to have some continuity clinic experience where you go, in this case, every Monday in the afternoon to learn about the behind the scenes of medicine, behind the scenes of doctoring. How do you read a medical chart? How do you make a referral? How do you balance the issues of wanting to give good care to your patient, but also the demands on what the insurance will cover? Those kind of big concepts and stuff, we walk you through it with the clinic. It used to be back in the days of yore, when you were in medical school, you studied around the clock. But for us, nowadays, being a little more progressively minded in the year 2021, we recognize that that's not the best way to learn. And so more and more medical schools are offering you the opportunity to have study breaks in the schedule. And so in this example right here, you have 2.5 afternoons where you have free time to study as you wish. And so you might study with a couple of colleagues, you might study on your own at a coffee shop, you might go to a nephrologist to have a conversation about polycystic kidney disease because you understand X and Y, but you need a little bit of help understanding Z a little bit more with that. So that's just kind of an example of what your first year looks like in medical school, which prepares you for the second year of medical school at Vanderbilt. Now,
can I interrupt
yes,
you and ask a question?
yes,
Is that okay? I'm sorry.
yes.
There's a great question in the chat that I thought was relevant to this.
Oh, good, because I can't see the chat. So thank you for interrupting.
I'm so glad. Yes. So for those small groups, either the case-based learning or maybe some of the labs that might be in small groups, are you with the same people? And do you know how that might be true across different medical schools, or do you mix with students?
That's a really good question. I know it's some of my colleagues at other medical schools, you are in kind of a cohort group. Like we have our colleges system. And so some of your work will be handled through your college system, but some of your experiences are just hodgepodge. We want to mix you up with some different people. And so this block on the colorful schematic on the top, like let's say microbes and immunity. Your M&I block, you might be with these 6 people in your case-based learning group, but then in homeostasis, part 1 that we do right before the winter break, you might be with another group of students. We think it's important that you work with different people in a different style all the time. Because in medicine, you're constantly working with different personalities, and we think it's important that you get exposure and experience with that early on in a supportive environment. I think one of the biggest transitions from pre-med to medical school is the ability to trust your classmates that they are also passionate about their learning. When I say, hey, we're going to do a group project, if your college experience is like 99% of America, when you do a group project, you're the one that does all the work, and the other people are like hitchhikers and they're just hanging onto your coattails because they know that you are dedicated and you're a hard worker and you're trying to go somewhere with your life. And they're like, nah, I'm not as interested in that. So I'm going to go and, watch something on Netflix, and I'll just depend on you to create the PowerPoint for this group project or whatever. In medical school, it's very different because in medical school, everybody also shares that same passion for lifelong learning, and because that's one of the things that we really try to suss out of the application material and stuff. So, so rest assured that the folks that will be in your small group learning also takes their education very seriously. And I would love to say it's only for Vanderbilt students, but that is across the board for all medical schools. Now, for anatomy lab, when you're looking at medical schools that you want to go to, I think it's important for you to learn how they handle the anatomy lab experience. What's the ratio of students to a donor? Do they do actual dissection, or do they do, I can never pronounce this word, but plasticated anatomy, where you already have plasticated body parts that you're dealing with, instead of actually being able to actually dissect the donor body with yourself. So different medical schools kind of approach the dissection experience a little bit different in their gross anatomy lab experience. For us, we're a little more old school. We do a traditional cadaver dissection. Our ratio is usually 6 students to 1 donor. Sometimes it's a little bit smaller. Sometimes it might be a student or 2 larger, depends on how the math works out with that. And we rotate you constantly with different students in your dissection. And the reason why is, once again, going back to personalities. We find that sometimes in the anatomy lab, people will defer to certain roles if they're with the same group the entire time. And so we want it to be that, if Susie's doing the first cut and Nathan is the note taker and Jane is, looking up stuff and everything like that, in the next rotation group, Nate might be the first cut and Susie might be taking the notes and stuff like that. So we want you to get different experiences instead of it always being the same people who are doing the first cut or same people who are always taking notes.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you so much, Dr. Bowman, for interrupting with the chat. The chat box isn't coming up on my screen right here, so I'm not able to keep up with that, so I appreciate it. And please feel free to ask other questions as we go on, because you might see something that might spark a question. Sometimes I have it built into the end of the talk, but I want this to be engaging for us, okay? Second year of medical school, you're going to go through your core clerkships for a lot of medical schools. Some medical schools still push this to your third and fourth year. For us, we move your core clerkships to your second year. So that way you're able to build your third and fourth year and immerse yourself in what you're truly passionate about learning for in time to be competitive for a residency. I'll explain that in a slide or two down the road. But every medical school you'll go to will have you do a rotation in general medicine, surg, peds, OB-GYN, psych neuro. There are lots of other health profession or medical specialties out there. And so for Vanderbilt, we allow you to have elective time that if you want to see what oncology is like or nuclear medicine or whatever the area might be, you'll have that opportunity to have kind of a little elective buffer time in there. Because ideally at the end of your second year, you either A, know what you want to be when you grow up, or B, no, you don't want to do these certain areas of medicine, but are still on the fence about a couple of things. And we're fine with that because your third and fourth year allows you to immerse yourself in what you're passionate about. Going back to what I mentioned earlier about a competency-based curriculum, one of the things that you'll note when you look at the different curriculums that are out there for medical schools is that no two curriculums are the same. So whatever medical school you elect to start off at is going to be the medical school that you will want or plan to graduate from. You don't get to transfer medical schools like you do undergraduate colleges. So it's a little bit different for us. But the reason why I tell you that information is because on this slide, I have away rotations, and I want to explain what those are in just 1 second. So here's an example of somebody who wanted to go into emergency medicine. All of our students, no matter what area of medicine you want to go into, are required to do advanced clinical electives. They're all required to do integrated science courses. They all have to do one acting internship. But the courses that our students take are a little bit different. And this is common with a lot of other medical schools that have a really strong focus on personalized medicine and the ability to really teach our students as individuals instead of lumping all of you guys together. It allows you to kind of choose your adventure, if you will, in medicine. So this is an individual that decided to go into emergency medicine. We knew right after the second year, emergency medicine was what this individual wanted to do. And so we advised him to take certain classes that would help him out in a career in emergency medicine. You might look on here and go, well, why would an emergency medicine physician need to know about anesthesiology like that? Doesn't make sense. You're not doing surgery as an emergency medicine physician. The reason why is because in emergency medicine, you have to do a lot of intubation. And so that's a skill you get better at the more opportunities you have to do it. In emergency medicine, there's chaos around you. There's noises, there's this, there's that. You don't necessarily have a controlled environment to do the intubation techniques. Whereas if you rotate through with anesthesiology, it's a controlled environment. The patients have that scheduled surgery. You can go in and practice your intubation technique a little bit more with that. Shade Tree Clinic, a lot of medical schools have student-run clinics. I would love to say it's just us, so only apply to Vanderbilt if you have a passion for this area. But I know that some medical schools do offer student-run clinics. Ours is called Shade Tree Clinic. It's a very popular rotation for our students to go to. But going back to transferring medical schools, you'll see it says away rotation on here. Basically, there's a group of medical schools that are part of this visiting student rotation group. And so it allows you as a Vanderbilt medical student to do an OA rotation at like UCLA's emergency room, for example, to get some different exposures and experiences in medicine along the way. Here's an example of somebody who didn't know what they wanted to do when they grew up, decided after some advising and counseling and getting some different experiences that they were really interested in kind of more of the visuals of medicine, if you will. So try to advance clinical elective in derm, tried one in pathology, and then radiology was one that just kind of clicked and was what she wanted to go into. So we offer a lot of personalization in the curriculum at Vanderbilt. This is becoming more and more common as medical schools are thinking creatively on how they can educate 21st century learners. It allows you the opportunity to have that with that.
I got a quick question about those.
Okay, I saw your hand raised. I didn't. Okay, sure.
Sorry.
Fire away.
Thank you. Someone asked for the away rotations. You got some interest there.
Yes.
First of all, it sounds like that can be all over the country, or maybe not all over the country, but it could be at different institutions across the country and not necessarily local hospitals or affiliated, Vanderbilt affiliated hospitals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. And then how popular are those? Maybe you could answer at Vanderbilt or maybe your sense at other schools too.
Great question. I'll be honest with you. It really depends on what the individual wants to go into for a residency. We advise students if they want to go into a very challenging residency to get into, just because the numbers, there's nationwide, there's just not enough residency positions out there to absorb all the people who are interested in that residency, like dermatology, for example, that it might be beneficial for them to do an away rotation at University of Chicago or wherever they want to match for some of those experiences. And the reason why is it helps you as a candidate applying to that residency position because you got to know some of the physicians in the dermatology clinic at that institution and stuff. And so they remember you, they've had that experience, there's that connection there. And it also helps you because you're learning a little bit more of another skill from other physicians in dermatology and stuff. So it broadens your experience a little bit more. But we have a lot of students who go on to great residency positions that elect not to do an away rotation, and that's totally fine too. You're not kind of stabbing in the dark, and well, maybe I shouldn't use that term with med students, but you're not necessarily trying to figure this out on your own. Medical schools like Vanderbilt, we advise you, you have a lot of advising. And so when you tell us this is what you want to go into, and these are the kind of institutions you want to match in for your residency, we'll give you advice whether you take it or not. That's up to you on how you can be competitive for that program. There's a sort of a common application process software that students can sign up for, and it allows you to kind of funnel your application materials in for the places that are taking visiting students. We have a number of students that will rotate with us from other prestigious medical schools because they want to match at Vanderbilt. So.
And then one more question, are the away rotations typically about the same length as a normal rotation? And how long is that?
Typically about a month long.
Thanks, great.
Absolutely. So one thing that a lot of medical schools are doing that are kind of more of the research focused medical schools is that we're baking research into the curriculum, and Vanderbilt's no different. We offer, or you'll have a 3 to 6 month phase during your third year of medical school to do research. Your first and second year, we don't encourage you to do research, not even like wink, wink. Don't do research, wink, wink. We really want you during your first and second years to do what an M1 and an M2 truly do during those time frames. But what we're doing is we're kind of getting you acclimated to doing medical school research. Who are the kind of the players in the area of research that you have, working on, with your IRB and all that good stuff. So that way, during the beginning of your third year, you can go straight to your research experience. You're not trying to wait for the mice that you've ordered to come in. Like they're already waiting for you. Like you're good to go, ready to knock it out of the ballpark your third year. Historically, research has been one of those things where you have had to slide it into the curriculum as you see fit. I will say that not every medical school out there has a research phase. So if you are somebody that truly values research and wants to have a devoted time to really exploring that, then I would recommend when you're looking at medical schools to apply to, looking at the curriculum to see, do they give you that time in the curriculum to really get to focus on your research? Or is it something that you're going to have to just shove into the curriculum whenever you can to get that research experience that you value? Sometimes students are a little hesitant about doing research at a medical school because unfortunately they did research as an undergrad and it just wasn't a good fit. They couldn't really see the value add in it. Maybe their PI wasn't the most supportive of their med school journey and they were really trying to train folks that wanted to do a PhD instead. But I will say that the folks that you'll work with at the medical school campus is coming from Vanderbilt. We have an amazing research program here for our PIs. But at other medical schools, like they understand that you're a medical student first. You're going to be here for a short amount of time. Let's get you as exposed to this wonderful research as we can. The other thing that Vanderbilt does that not necessarily every medical school offers is the opportunity to research in any of the colleges that we have here at Vanderbilt. The only area that we've yet to have somebody do their research in is at our Blair School of Music. But we're always hoping that somebody would be interested in doing research in that area. But we've had students, in fact, I had one student who she had kind of an unfortunate undergraduate research experience, loved everything there was about Vanderbilt, but just wasn't gung-ho about signing on the dotted line to do a research phase. But through kind of connecting her with some people, her research question, and it was phrased much better on her poster session than what I'm butchering out here, but it was something like prenatal testing and non-native English speakers, their ability to have proactive prenatal testing during the course of their pregnancy. And she ended up going into OB-GYN, but that was her research question. So we allow you to really explore and learn a little bit more about what you're just intellectually curious and after the research phase. So let's talk a little bit about what life is like in medical school, because we kind of got bogged down a little bit in like what the day-to-day and year-to-year kind of looks like. But broadly, you're going to be a full-time medical student. And so if you are thinking, hey, I'm going to work my way through medical school, financially, that's not really going to be a feasible option for you, because when you're in medical school, no matter where you go for medical school, you're a full-time medical student. And so your schedule changes at whim. And so if you were planning on waiting tables at Chili's while you went to medical school during the day, you're going to find that it's just not going to work out super well for you. So you have to be all in, kind of that marathon mindset of a full-time medical student for at least the next 4 years. The collaborative learning, like I mentioned earlier, your classmates all are very passionate about medicine too. So there's a lot of collaboration, not only with your classmates, but also with the faculty. You know, like when you were in like high school and stuff, like you were down here and your teachers were up here. And then, you know, you got to college and your biology professor was like, hey, call me Mike instead of Dr. Smith. And you're like, okay, you know. So the kind of that disparity between you as a student and them as a faculty member kind of shifted down a little bit more. When you're in medical school, it goes down even more so. It's a very collaborative environment, the faculty who work with you. Here at Vanderbilt, it's a very supportive environment. Our faculty are ready to help you grow and develop into the physician that you want to be. It's a safe space to learn. It's very supportive with that. You'll also have the opportunity to attend grand rounds and guest speakers. And so grand rounds might be that the psychiatry department is having a guest speaker to talk about adolescent females depression during COVID times. And you might go, well, that sounds really interesting. I want to go listen to that or whatever. We do a guest speaker series here. We have people from various aspects of medicine come in and talk with our med students and stuff about what they're going into, and a lot of lunch and learns and things like that. Student run clinics, like I said, I would love to say Vanderbilt's the only school that does this, so come to Vanderbilt, please. But more and more medical schools are offering student run clinic. Our student run clinic, Shade Tree Clinic, has a patient panel of 300 patients. It is very humbling for our students when in the eyes of the patients that they serve, like that's their doctor, you know, and stuff. So it's a very wonderful way to give back to the community that you serve by working in your student run clinics. We do a lot of engagement in the community, blood pressure drives, clothing drives, canned food drives, things like that to help the students that the community they serve. We also have lots of student organizations. So if you're a joiner, if you enjoy baking or dance or cultural group or religious group or an affinity group, student government, whatever, you can continue to do that at any medical school that you go to. That ability to kind of have an outlet in your student organizations is something more and more med schools are finding attractive. It's a lot of work, but we really do provide you those social outlets that are so important. I think one of the cool things for me is when like our faculty members will talk about their classmates that they were in med school with, like in the mid 80s. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing that you still keep up with them. And the reason why is you're with a small group of people for 4 years of medical school, you build those social bonds. So other things to note about medical schools in general, for the most part, unfortunately, med school is hard to get into, but it's easy, air quotes, easy to stay in medical school, meaning we don't take a lot of risks on people that we don't think at the end of 4 years of medical school could graduate. And so, but we do recognize that sometimes life happens. We had a student, he's in residency now, but during his first year of medical school, his uncle passed away. He took a week off to go home and be with the family. And then a month later, his father passed away. And we're like, you know what, you need to go home and be at home with your family during this time. So we gave a leave of absence, no problem whatsoever. Students joined us back. The student joined us back a year later, continued to rock and roll, and is now in a residency program and stuff. So it's flexible as much as it can be to support what you are going through as a learner in medical school. Research years, like I said, when I talked about research earlier, one of the things that Vanderbilt has to offer that I know a couple of my colleagues at other medical schools do is the opportunity to pause the MD degree, to take a year out to do full-time research, to then come back and continue pace with the MD degree. We offer that opportunity for students. And the cool thing with that, for us at least, we actually pay students to do a year of research for that. So sometimes if students are like, oh, wow, I just need a little bit of a break because I have become very interested in, you know, X, Y, and Z, and they want to take a research year, we encourage that a great deal. Deferrals for the admissions process, we are totally fine with it. You get into medical school and you go, I need a break. I'm about to start my marathon, and before I get started, I want to go and relax a little bit before I start running that race, and that is fine. Don't feel like you have to go to medical school right after you graduate from college. I'll tell you a little bit more about that when I talk to you guys in the future about the admissions process. It's a very small environment. I think the smallest med school I want to say is Morehouse, and they're at like 65, I think, students in their first year class. The largest, I think, is Jefferson, and I want to say they have like 250 in their first year class. So that's the largest. So there's kind of a span in there. Most schools have about 120 spots in the first year class. Ours is the class size of 96. So it allows you to really develop strong bonds with your classmates. Something that other schools offer is pipeline or pre-matriculation programs designed to help our students be at 100% capacity when they start medical school. And so different schools have different opportunities for that. At some schools, you come about a month before classes begin to kind of go through sort of an academic boot camp, how to learn as a med student, things like that. For us, we do a few days before the start of class to get you caught up to speed on all that stuff. There's also a lot of initiatives to reduce student loan debt. As much as I would love to say money should not play a factor in your decision to sign on the dotted line and become a physician, you're going to be taking on a lot of student loan debt, and typically your generation of learners are a little bit more adverse to loan debt than like old people like me who are just like, that's part and parcel of what you're about to sign up for. But the student loan debt is a serious concern. We offer scholarship programs here at Vanderbilt. I know some of my colleagues at other medical schools offer, 100% tuition. I know there's some med schools that offer 100% tuition and a living stipend. Different opportunities are out there for people to help reduce the national student loan debt for medicine. So after you become a physician, an MD or a DO, you are hopefully going to want to practice medicine by doing diagnostic and prescriptive rights, meaning you'll have to go through a residency program. So as much as you may have heard about the MCAT and you think, let me just get this MCAT off my back and then life will be easy. Sadly, that's not how it happens. You have to take a couple of additional examinations, similar in scope to an MCAT, if you will. You'll have a step 1 examination. For us, you'll typically take it at the end of your second year. That seems to be becoming more and more the norm across the nation, is after your second year, you'll take step 1. It is being moved to a pass-fail system after January 2022. So this would affect you more than likely. For us, we're not going to revamp our curriculum at all to make any accommodations for step 1 going pass-fail, because our students have always performed very well in step 1. But I know some of my colleagues at other medical schools are in the process of revamping the curriculums to help accommodate for step 1 being a pass-fail examination. After your 3rd year with us, you'll take your step 2 examination. And that's a scored examination testing your clinical knowledge. You might hear something about the step 2 CS. That test was discontinued at the start of COVID, and they just announced that there's no plans on reinstituting that. From what my students would say is it's a waste of time and money, but I don't want to say that's the reason why they're discontinuing it. I'm sure that they're sussing out your knowledge through the clinical knowledge examination, the CK, a little bit better for that. But, and then during your 4th year of medical school, you will be applying for residencies. And we talked a little bit about doing the away rotations and what that looks like to do a visiting student program. Unfortunately, there's a little bit more pressure across the nation for residency positions. And if you're like, why is this one talking about residency so much? Remember, residency, once again, after your MD degree, you have to do after your UME medical degree, you have to do the graduate medical education, the GME, excuse me. And that's that residency program. And so your residency years will last a couple of years if you want to do like internal medicine, general medicine, up to 7 years for neurosurgery. I think that's the longest residency position that's out there. And so, like I said, there's becoming more and more pressure for residency positions because across the nation, we've all expanded our med school classes to fill the void of physicians in underserved communities and stuff. So we've all extended our class sizes, but unfortunately the amount of residency physicians has not followed suit. In order to become a practicing physician, you have to go through that residency program. Plus, we also have international medical graduates who go to medical school in different countries who want to practice medicine in America. They have to go through the residency match. We have people who are shifting residency or career focuses altogether. They were a pediatrician and now they want to be a neurosurgeon or whatever, you know. So there's a lot of additional warm bodies trying to apply for residency positions in America. So what we have is something called the match system. And so starting your 4th year of medical school, you will apply for residency. There's software called ERAS that you'll go through. If you have listened to your pre-med advisor talk about AMCAS, the Common Application to Med School, ERAS is the same thing, except it's for residency. You have to send your application, letters of recommendation, test scores, all that good stuff, just like you are when you're applying to medical school. On an earlier slide, I mentioned about the pass-fail curriculum for a lot of schools. The MSPE, the Medical School Performance Evaluation Letter, sometimes called the Dean's Letter, is what sells you to a residency program, if you will. It's not a form letter that's, you know, Jen Kimble was a student in our medical school. She was great. If you have any questions, let us know. That's not what an MSPE is. It's detailed, it's long. It talks specifics about our medical school students' journey to residency. So when you're looking at medical schools, you want to go to a medical school where your dean of students knows you really well, who can advocate for you in the MSPE letter. So for residency, you'll interview October into January. And then in February, you'll submit a ranked list of all the residency programs you liked. At the same time, those programs are listing out all the people that they liked in rank order. They send the information into the National Residency Match Program software. There's an algorithm that, fun fact, won the Nobel Prize several years ago for, I think it was mathematics or economics, but nonetheless, it's a mathematical algorithm that they throw these application materials into and stuff. And then in March, you will find out where you're going for a residency. Across the nation, it's the 3rd Friday of March at noon Eastern is when the matches are released. But the beginning of that week is something called SOAP. And SOAP is basically what medical schools and residencies use if there are any unfilled spots. So what happens is that Monday, you'll get an email either saying, congratulations, you've matched. You'll find out where on Friday, or you get an email that says, you did not match. Here's how you apply through SOAP. Basically, you spend the entire week doing phone interviews with different residency programs. They then select who they're going to give a residency to, as long as you've agreed to that. And then come Friday, those students that went through SOAP will also match. Nobody will be the wiser whether you went through SOAP to get your residency or you just got it naturally on Friday and stuff. But you'll want to go to a medical school that has a lot of helpful advising to help students select where they're applying for residency. Because if, for example, if you're an international student, there are some residency programs that won't be able to take you because they can't support your visa status. So there's a lot of different things that you kind of need to look at, and you'll want to go to a school that prepares you well for it. We are unable to capture first choice residency data. You'll hear people go, oh, XYZ med school, 100% of their students get their first choice for residency. The reason why is it's all confidential. So we could tell you that our students are always very happy with where they match, but we can't ever ascertain if that is truly their first choice and where they match. There's something called a couples match, which allows, like if you find your significant other along the way, the two of you want to be in a certain city or at a certain hospital together for residency match, you go together through the couples match, you'll rank, they'll rank, program ranks you guys together. So that's one of the things that factors into match. We'll have students that have a personal preference. Like I'm looking for a residency program that really focuses on underserved communities or whatever. Okay, that's a personal preference. We have some people who say, hey, I want to be back home in Oklahoma for residency. Okay, that affects where they list for their match. We have some people who really want to know what kind of support structures are in place, i.e. financially, to help students out with funding during their residency. So during your undergraduate medical education, you're paying tuition. During residency, you're actually paid for the services that you make and contribute to the hospital. Average salary is about $64,000 a year for that.
That is so wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen. Just all of this was really helpful to frame the whole summer. We really appreciate having you come. And just so you know, we have med students talk and residents talking. So this is a wonderful.
Oh, that's very good. That's awesome.
Thank you
Hopefully
so
they'll
much.
back me up. I'll tell you what, you'll get a much better take of what med school is like talking to students and residents than what I'm telling you. So hopefully this kind of prepped your palate for you to really ask them the important questions. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was good to see you. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Take good care of yourselves, everyone.
Check out our website to find recordings of all of our videos. We'll get them posted about a week after each of the presentations. We can't wait to see you.